They teach you in archaeology that the first cities were built on grain and law. They're wrong. They were built on gold. For a century, scholars translated the cuneiform tablets from the royal cemetery of Ur with academic detachment. The Great Death Pit, with its sacrificed retinue, was a fascinating brutality. The gold helmets, bull-headed lyres, and lapis lazuli were magnificent artifacts. But one tablet, catalogued as Administrative Record 337b, Livestock Tally, was misfiled. It wasn't from Ur. Its dialect was older, from the city-state of Kish. And it wasn't about sheep. I found it because I was looking for something else. My specialty is archaeometallurgy, tracing the source of ancient metals. I was cross-referencing gold purity from various Sumerian sites when the anomalous data point appeared. A spectrographic analysis from the 1990s, poorly logged, mentioned a gold bead from a private collection, purported Kish provenance, with a unique arsenic signature. That signature matched only one place, a barely documented mining region in the Taurus Mountains of southern Turkey. The bead's museum accession number was vague. The trail was cold. Until frustrated, I began looking at every Kish tablet I could find, searching for any mention of gold sourcing. That's when I saw the digital scan of tablet 337b. The script was early dynastic cuneiform. The first few lines were indeed about goats, but at the bottom, in a denser, more deliberate script, was an addendum. It read, "For the safeguarding of the heavenly metal of Enmebaragesi, true king of Kish, whose word is the word of Enlil." It is placed in the heart of the mountain, where the lion-faced river emerges, to be a shield for Kish in the days when the kingship descends into darkness. The key is the king's own measure, cast in the same earth. My breath caught. Enmebaragesi, a semi-legendary figure, one of the first Sumerian kings whose name appears on the Sumerian king list. His heavenly metal wasn't poetic. In early texts, it meant specifically gold from a celestial meteorite or the purest divine ore. This was a treasure deposit record, not a burial inventory, a king hiding a strategic reserve. The hunt for the $65 million Sumerian royal gold reserve had begun with a misfiled tablet and a single anomalous bead. Clue 1. The lion-faced river. The clue was geographic, the mountain where the lion-faced river emerges. Sumerian wasn't my first language, but I knew their hydronyms were descriptive. Lion-faced river would be Huadingir Pirig. Cross-referencing early Mesopotamian geographical lists and Hittite texts that borrowed Sumerian place names, I found a reference to a trade route passing a stone lion spring near a mountain called Kudidag in the Taurus range. The spring was the source of a tributary to the Tigris. Satellite imagery showed a rugged area near the Turkish-Syrian border. Geological surveys indicated ancient, shallow gold workings. But where the river emerges could mean the source, a spring. I needed to be on the ground. At Kudidag, the stone lion was a natural rock formation at the mouth of a cave from which a cold, clear stream flowed. It did, eerily, look like a weathered lion's head. This was the place, but the cave was shallow, just a damp recess. I scanned the interior with LiDAR. Nothing. Then I reread the clue. In the heart of the mountain. Not the cave. Deeper. The river emerged here. I needed to find where the water came from inside the mountain. Using tracer dye and listening equipment, we mapped the subterranean watercourse. The water originated from a deep aquifer, but there was an anomaly. A consistent, faint echo from a cavity about 50 meters in, offset from the main water channel. The mountain was porous limestone. There could be a chamber. But how to access it? The clue said, "The key is the king's own measure, cast in the same earth." The king's measure was likely a cubit rod, the standard of length for a kingdom, the literal measure of the king's rule. And cast in the same earth meant made of the same material. Not gold, but something else from the region. Clue 2. The king's measure. I returned to the artifact record. The private collection gold bead with the unique arsenic signature had come with a note. Found with a curious copper rod, incised. The rod hadn't been analyzed. I tracked down the collector's heirs through auction records. After months of negotiation, they let me examine the piece. It was a copper bar, about 52 centimeters long, close to a Sumerian cubit. It was heavily corroded, but under a microscope, faint cuneiform markings were visible. It wasn't a dedication. It was a ruler, with precise subdivisions. And at one end, a symbol, the cuneiform sign for Kish. This was it. Enmebaragesi's cubit. But it was just a ruler. How was it a key? The inscription on the tablet said, "Cast in the same earth." I had the spectrograph of the gold bead. I ran a new, ultra-precise elemental analysis on the copper rod. The result was stunning. The copper ore had an identical rare arsenic and nickel impurity profile as the gold. They came from the exact same geological formation. This rod wasn't just a measure, it was a geological fingerprint. The key wasn't the rod itself, it was its composition. It would match the lock. But where was the lock? The cubit's length gave me an idea. In Sumerian architecture, important dimensions were often multiples of the royal cubit. Perhaps the distance to the chamber's entrance was measured in royal cubits from a specific point. I returned to the lion's head spring. Using the exact length of the copper rod, I measured every visible crack and fissure in the rock face. On the third day, I found it. A narrow, vertical fissure, exactly 10 royal cubits, about 5.2 meters to the right of the lion's mouth, was not a natural crack. Its edges showed microscopic tool marks. It was a deliberate, disguised seam. Clue 3. The heart of the mountain. We used expandable pneumatic wedges to carefully open the seam. It gave way to a low, human-cut tunnel, barely wide enough to crawl through. The air that whispered out was dry and carried the faint, millennia-old scent of dust and ozone. The tunnel descended at a sharp angle for about 30 meters before opening into a chamber. My headlamp pierced a darkness untouched for over 4,500 years. The chamber was small, perhaps 6 meters square. The walls were rough-hewn bedrock, and in the center sat not chests, but ingots. Dozens of them, stacked in neat rows. They were not the shiny, refined gold we imagine. They were electrum, a natural mix of gold and silver, and they still bore the rough texture of the mold. A porous ceramic that had disintegrated around them, leaving the metal shapes behind. Each ingot was a simple, elongated oval loaf shape about the size of a large shoe. They were stunningly heavy. But more astonishing than the raw metal were the artifacts. Along one wall were gold vessels, simple, hammered bowls, and wide, shallow cups of pure, soft gold. Their surfaces were unadorned. This was functional royal tableware. In a stone niche were gold tools, a chisel, a saw, and a heavy hammer, all made of solid gold. These were ceremonial, perhaps used in a foundation ritual, symbolizing the king's power to shape the very earth. But the centerpiece made my heart stop. On a low limestone plinth sat a life-sized, sculpted golden head of a bull. It was pure, refined gold, worked with astonishing skill. The horns curved with perfect symmetry, the eyes were inlaid with lapis lazuli, and the stylized beard was patterned with delicate grooves. This was no mere ornament, it was the divine bull of heaven, the symbol of the god Enlil's power, and by extension the king who ruled with Enlil's mandate. It was Enmebaragesi's ultimate statement of legitimacy, rendered in the most precious substance on earth. This was not a tomb, it was a vault, a strategic reserve of raw monetary power and sacred regalia, hidden away from rivals, natural disaster, or invasion. It was the seed capital of kingship itself. Clue 4. The geological lock. Remembering the cubit's composition, I examined the plinth holding the bull's head. At its base was a rectangular slot. I carefully took the copper cubit rod, and not knowing what to expect, inserted it. It slid in perfectly. But nothing happened. Then I realized. The clue said, "Cast in the same earth." The lock wasn't mechanical, it was chemical. The unique arsenic-nickel signature in the copper was the key. I scraped a microscopic sample from the slot and analyzed it with a portable XRF scanner. The composition was identical. The lock was a knowing mechanism. Only someone who possessed the royal cubit and understood it was a geological match would be looking for this chamber. The slot was merely a final confirmation, a signature written in elemental chemistry. The true security was the puzzle itself. The God King's capital. We didn't move anything. We documented, photographed, and took atmospheric samples. The Turkish Ministry of Culture was notified. The extraction was a military precision operation, with the bull's head transported in a custom shock-absorbent case. The valuation was a complex dance of weight, purity, and priceless historical value. The electrum ingots, 85 total, averaging 1.5 kilogram each. Their gold content varied, but the average was 70%. By weight and precious metal value, $12 million. The gold vessels and tools, pure soft gold. Artistic and historical value far exceeded melt. Insured value, $8 million. The divine bullhead, solid refined gold, weighing 18.7 kilo. As a unique, masterwork sculpture from the dawn of civilization, it was literally priceless. The insured valuation for transport and display was set at $45 million. Total conservative valuation, $65 million. The gold now resides in the Ankara Museum of Anatolian Civilizations, in a climate-controlled room beside the treasures of King Midas. The bullhead stares out with lapis eyes, a relic of a time when kings were gods and gold was the flesh of heaven. For me, the treasure was the vindication. The Sumerian king list wasn't just myth. Enmebaragesi was real, his wealth was real, and in his supreme act of kingship, he didn't just hoard gold. He turned it into a timeless promise, sealed in stone and chemistry. He hid the foundation of his city's power so completely that it took satellites, spectrographs, and a forgotten copper ruler to hear his whisper from the dawn of history. The first kings weren't just lawmakers. They were the world's first bankers, and they built their vaults to outlast eternity.